Arrange the dialogue in such a way as to prevent legitimate criticism of the speech, of Socrates' speech in the pamphlet. That we must see whether that is true. Now, what was Agathon replying?
You want to throw a spell over me, Socrates, said Agathon, so that I may be flustered with the consciousness of the high expectations the audience formed of my discourse.
In other words, he suspects Socrates of a slightly unfair trick. Yeah? He links up this evening exchange of speeches with his contest regarding tragedy. Unwittingly, he tells us that the hearers of the speeches must also be lookers on, lookers at, the speakers, the theater, the audience. Literally translated the theater, meaning the lookers on. The lookers on, not only the listeners. That is true of us, that we must also be. Yes?
Nay, Agathon, how forgetful I should be, replied Socrates. After noticing your high and manly spirit as you stepped upon the platform with your group, how you sent a straight glance at that vast assembly to show that you meant to do yourself credit with your production, and how you were not dismayed in the slightest. If I should now suppose you could be flustered on account of a few fellows like us.
In other words, you, Agathon, who had the courage to appear on the stage in your own play, will not be afraid to address us few fellows. Yes?
Why, Socrates, said Agathon, I hope you do not always fancy me so puffed up with the playhouse as to forget that an intelligent speaker is more alarmed with a few men of wit than fools.
Yet a few intelligent men are more fear-inspired than a multitude of fools. Hence, he means, I'm reasonably afraid now. It is not kind of you, Socrates, to make me still more afraid. That is a play going on. Now, what does Socrates reply?
No, Agathon, it would be wrong of me indeed, said Socrates, to associate you with any such foolish notion. I'm quite sure
you are much too sophisticated to not to be afraid of a few intelligent, powerless people instead of the many powerful. Yeah?
You're quite sure that on finding yourself with a few persons whom you considered clever, you would make more account of them than of the multitude. Yet we, perhaps, are not performing. For we were there too, part of the crowd. But suppose you found yourself with other folk who were clever, you would probably feel ashamed that they should witness any shameful act you might feel yourself to be doing. Will you agree to that? Quite true, he said. Whereas before the multitude you would not be ashamed if you felt you were doing anything shameful.
Yeah. No, so I know that you are not so cruel, of course. But we here belong to those fools. For we too were at the theater. And you were not afraid of us then. In other words, you are cruel, Agathon. You would not be ashamed to do something disgraceful in the presence of the many. Of the fools, i.e. of all those present now who all belong to the admittedly despicable theater crowd. You, Agathon, are in fact not afraid at all now, as little as you were on the stage. Now, you see, Agathon is in great troubles by Phaedrus' intervention he is saved. But what should he have said? The question is not whether one may not sometimes do what the many consider disgraceful. The answer would be simply yes. Sometimes you have to do something that the many consider disgraceful. But whether one should do it in the front, whether one should do in front of the many what oneself considers disgraceful, or rather, whether it makes any difference, whether one does something disgraceful, when one does something disgraceful, whether one does it in the presence of the few wise who know it to be disgraceful, or of the many fools who do not know it to be disgraceful. The answer would again seem to be simple. One should not do what one knows to be disgraceful under any circumstances. Yet must one not also consider what the many consider disgraceful? Must one not pay some respect to that? As Aristotle puts it, a gentleman will do both the things which are noble by nature and the things which are noble only by convention. What Agathon means to say is this: to do what is noble by convention is easy. To do what is noble by nature is difficult. Therefore, I'm afraid now, Agathon is not a rebel against the nomos, against the convention. The reason for this deficiency of Agathon is this: he claims to be ashamed of the wise and not of the unwise. In fact, he is not ashamed of either. He lies. He lies about himself. And that has perhaps something to do with the fact that he's a poet. We must see that. As the poets lie was notorious, but whether they lie about themselves is another matter, and perhaps it is pertinent to Agathon in particular. Now let us see whether that is true. Let us read the end of that.
Here Phaedrus interposed, "My dear Agathon, if you go on answering Socrates, he will be utterly indifferent to the fate of our business, so long as he has someone to argue with, especially someone so handsome. For my part, I enjoy listening to Socrates' arguments, but I am responsible for our eulogy of love, and must study his speech from every one of you in turn. Let each of you two then give the god his meed before you have your argument." "You're quite right," Phaedrus said on that note. "And there is nothing to hinder my speaking, for I shall find many other occasions for arguing with Socrates."
Yeah, let us stop there. Now, Phaedrus thinks that Suarez and Agathon will have their dialogue immediately after their speeches. And Agathon thinks that Suarez and Agathon will have their dialogue hereafter frequently. Who is a better diviner of the two? Both are, but they won't have it immediately after their speeches, because a diviner is concerned. That is, and Agathon should somehow be the better diviner, being a poet. The main point, however, is, which doesn't come out at all in translation, the fourfold reference to conversation, to dialogue, dialegista, where he says argue, etc. The term is always dialogue. Now, what is the meaning of this interlude? It is not the first interlude, as you know. The first interlude came prior to Anaxagoras' speech, which was due to Aristophanes' incapacitation. In the progress of the evening, with the progressive exhaustion of the subject, the general incapacitation increases, not only the particular one of Aristophanes due to the hiccup. The general incapacity for long speech. Now, if people are too tired to make long speeches, they are not too tired to have conversation, exchange, dialogues. The dialogues come in as a mere substitute for long speeches here. This, however, is changed with Socrates' speech later, which is, so to speak, nothing but a dialogue, although it claims to be a speech. The first interludes were the dialogues between Anaxagoras and Aristophanes. They dealt with Aristophanes' ridiculous bodily handicap, of which Aristophanes himself was in no way ashamed. As the present interlude is chiefly a dialogue between Suarez and Agathon, a complete silence about Aristophanes here, deals with fear of disgrace, as distinguished from hiccup. Agathon and Suarez claim to have fear of disgrace, and that is a natural introduction to the subject, the beauty of Eros. Disgrace disgrace is the same as ugliness in Greek, aisthos. But Socrates and Agathon only claim to have such fear. In fact, they don't feel it. Yet only Agathon is found out. You have seen. Yeah? Socrates, not Socrates. For Agathon walks into a trap which Socrates had set. There was no reason for Agathon here to speak at that moment. One must be very careful in the presence of Socrates. Agathon becomes ridiculous. His beauty, his grace, his charm is somewhat spurious. He is a beautiful young man, as we have seen here and we'll see later, with a not so beautiful inside, contrasted with the ugly, oldish man Socrates, with a beautiful inside. Perhaps this applies to their speeches too. But we have also to consider this. Nowhere, and that is a good introduction to Agathon's speech, nowhere in the dialogue do we find perfect beauty. There's always something tainted in one way or the other, if only by a snub nose and protruding eyes, as in the case of Socrates. Now we turn to Agathon's speech.
I propose first to speak of the plan most proper for my speech.
You must be a bit louder.
I propose first to speak of the plan most proper for my speaking, and after that to speak. Every one of the previous speakers, instead of eulogizing the gods, has merely, as it seems to me, felicitated humanity of the benefits he bestows. Not one of them has told us what is the nature of the benefactor himself. There is but one correct method of giving anyone any kind of praise, namely to make the words unfold the character of them, and of the blessings brought by them, who is to be our theme. Hence, it is meet that we praise him first for what he is, and then for what he gives.
And let me stop here. As you will see from the Greek, Agathon is the only one who begins with an emphatic I, ego. Not he's beautiful and successful. And he knows that he's beautiful and successful. To speak, he makes a distinction of how one ought to speak and when to speak. To speak of how one ought to speak is not truly to speak. Is this intelligible? No? Yeah. For example, you have a methodology of the social science. Do you say anything about social phenomena in the methodology of the social sciences? In a way, you are silent. To speak of that, of how to speak, how to think. There is a formality about it which is empty. It would be different in one case. If the art of how to speak would be nothing but the other side of psychology, of knowledge of the soul, then of the science of how to speak would be full of content. And that is, of course, Plato's notion of rhetoric. The rhetoric is only the doctrine of the soul viewed from the point of view of how to influence or persuade other people. Aristophanes had blamed all earlier human beings that they did not worship Eros. Agathon only blames all earlier speakers tonight. He's much more modest from this point of view. He surely is not a revolutionary, as Aristophanes was, an iconoclast. For iconoclasm is incompatible with beauty. Yeah, it's an ugly action. It may be necessary, but it's ugly. I cannot always repeat that. The Latin of the Greek word kalon, which is beautiful, fair, noble, respectable. Yeah? That it is all included. It's a Latin word honestum, that was only translated into honestum, is narrower because it also takes the meaning also of pushful, of beautiful, which Canon has. But in Greek it has this breadth, everything resplendent, whether for the eyes or for the mind, or in fame, it does not make any difference. You see in Agathon's speech, for the first time the God himself becomes a thing, not as something merely existing in the souls of men or in any other thing, but as self-subsisting. And the question is raised, that is not well translated, of what quality is a God, not of what nature of God is a God. Aristotle had almost touched upon this. He spoke of the dynamis, of the power of Eros. And he spoke of the power of Eros and the nature of man. Aristotle did not speak of the nature of Eros. He did not even speak of that quality of Eros, which Agathon refers to. We have to raise this question. Will Agathon discuss the nature of Eros or only his power, his quality? You see also in the way in which Agathon speaks, that is a very orderly speech, an orderly beginning, and will be throughout. A universal statement on every kind of praise, regarding every possible thing. And that's the universal statement on which he starts, and then the application. This and this is the right way to praise anything. But now we are supposed to praise Eros. Hence, this is a right way for praising Eros in particular. The gifts of Eros, that means that of which Eros is a cause. Gift is a metaphoric expression. In the next, read the next sentence, someone say there.
So I say that while all bound is blissful, love with no irreverence or offense be it spoken, is the most blissful, as being the most beautiful and the best.
Yeah, this gives you the plan of his speech. First, we have first Eros quality. A, the most beautiful. B is the best. And then the second part, Eros as cause of things outside of himself. The whole speech of Agathon is characterized by unusually clear order. And that has very much to do with beauty, because clear order is an element of beauty. But he does not raise the primary question, namely, what is Eros? The what, the essence, the nature, that will only be done in Sober speech. His praise of Eros, as you have seen, is necessarily a critique of the other gods. His very excuse, without offense, indicates that there is some prima facie reason for offense, otherwise you would never say that. They are all less than perfect regarding both beauty and goodness, otherwise Eros could not be the most beautiful and the best. Yes?
Most beautiful, I will explain. First of all, Daedalus, he is the youngest of the gods. He himself supplies clear evidence of this when he cries and pleads from old age. A swift thing, obviously, since it gains on us too quickly for our liking. Love hates it by nature.
We all believe to be older people, and he is no longer so very young, get old too fast. Eros, in his running away, is very faster than old age. Yeah?
Love hates it by nature and refuses to come within any distance of it. He is ever consorting with the young, and such also is he. Well says the old saw, like and like, together stretched.
Yeah, let us stop here. The first subdivision of regarding Eros' beauty is his usefulness. proven by the fact that Eros is always with the young and runs away from the old. But that, of course, does not yet prove that he is the youngest of the gods. What he implies is Eros is wholly young in every respect. Therefore, he is the youngest. His usefulness would be defective if he were not the youngest. So that is a very Platonic way of looking at that thing. The idea of beauty is the beautiful itself. First let me say the paradox. The idea of beauty is the most beautiful thing in the world. You can bring out the paradox by saying it in un-Platonic terms. The concept of beauty is the most beautiful thing in the world. The concept of justice is the most just thing in the world. Something of this is here. Plato surely says that the beautiful itself, as distinguished from any particular manifestation of beauty, is the most beautiful. That means, of course, that Plato's ideas are not concepts, as this should show. All other gods are older than Eros. But if oldness is deficient beauty, it means that all other gods are more or less ugly, at least not perfectly beautiful. Only love of similar for the similar, the theme of pederasty, as we have seen, but this is not used by Agathon for this purpose. He is not concerned with the defense of pederasty, as we will clear throughout. This problem is not dropped. Yes?
And though in much else I agree with Davis, in this I agree not, that love, by his account, is more ancient than Kronos and Dionysus. I say he is the youngest of the gods, and ever young, while those early dealings with the gods which Hesiod and Parmenides relate, I take to have been the work of necessity, not of love.
Necessity with a capital N. Yeah.
If there is any truth in those stories. For there would have been no galling, no fettering of each other, nor any of those various violences that love had been amongst them. Rather, only amity and peace, such as now subsists ever since love has reigned over the gods.
Yeah, that is so. He refers to Phaedrus, and he says he agrees in many things with Phaedrus, but in which things? That he doesn't tell us. Does he grant, for example, that Eros is not in the beloved? We must see. Agathon disagrees with Hesiod and Parmenides. Not with Homer, although Homer too speaks of such terrible fights among the gods. He does not wish to blame Homer. Now this is a matter of taste. You don't blame Homer. And there is a strange difficulty here because Homer is the oldest poet. Is there not a contrast between the blame of old age, of oldness, and the praise of Homer, which will come almost immediately after? Originally he says necessity, ananke, ruled over the gods. Now Eros rules as king over the gods, which means not Zeus is the king of the gods, but Eros is. If the stories told by Hesiod and Parmenides are true, Eros vanquished necessity, ananke. Yet Eros is the youngest god. He cannot always have ruled. Hence, Ananke must have ruled prior to Eros, according to the premise here. Hence, the stories told by Parmenides and Hesiod are true. The gods other than Eros lack virtue. Agathon tacitly opposes Aristophanes, who implied that necessity is stronger than Eros. Eros could never achieve, it was limited. The implication is familiar. Savage beginnings, progress. At the origin an uncle, and now savagery, bestiality of every kind, and then progress to civility and peace. The good is not identical with the old, as Plato implied, and no one, not even Aristophanes, contested. On the contrary, Aristophanes said the oldest was the best. Agathon contests it, and that brings him closer to Socrates, because that is a Platonic doctrine that the beginnings were savage, and if anyone doubts it, he should only read the third book of Plato's Laws. But Aristophanes contested already the assertion that Eros is the oldest god. Implicitly, that means there is a progress of enlightenment, a progress in the speeches. First, Eros is the oldest god. Then, Aristophanes, Eros is younger than the Olympian gods, Aristophanes. Then, Agathon, Eros is explicitly said to be the youngest god. And then the next step, the final step by Socrates, Eros is not a god at all. It's a constant demotion parallel with an increased praise, with a deeper praise. If Eros is the oldest god, Eros affects all things love. Eros is not specifically human, what Eric Symmachus had said. But if Eros is not the oldest god, then it is not necessary that all things love. That is also implied, and Agathon will come to that later. Now, in the sequel, Agathon pursues this theme of Eros' beauty by speaking of its tenderness, gentleness, or delicacy, however we might translate that Greek word. Not the youthfulness, but tenderness. Because it is obvious, if you want to praise the beauty of someone, it is not sufficient to say he's young, because we have seen young people who are not beautiful. Therefore you have to bring in some other qualities. Now let us see the next point.
So then he is young and delicate as all. He requires a poet such as Homer to set forth his delicacy divine.
You see here the praise of Homer.
Homer it is who tells of Ate as both divine and delicate.
Both a god and delicate, yeah?
You recollect those delicate feet of hers where he says, yet delicate are her feet, for on the ground she feeds not, only on the heads of men. So I know it is very proof of her delicacy that she goes not on hard things, but on soft. The same method will serve us to prove the delicacy of love. Not upon earth goes he, nor on our crowns, which are not very soft, but takes his way and abode in the softest things that exist. The tempers and souls of men, of gods and men, are his chosen habitation. Not indeed any soul as much as another's. When he comes upon one whose temper is hard, away he goes, but should it be soft, he makes his dwelling there. So if with feet and every way is one ever to get hold of the softest parts of the softest creatures, he needs must be most delicate. Youngest then and most delicate, and withal fine of form.
Now let's stop here. So this, the delicacy of Eros. You see the praise of Homer. Yet Homer did not praise Eros. He praised Ate, the goddess of mischief. Homer did not praise a male god in this way, but a female god. And second, he did not praise in this way love, but mischief. Homer conceived of Eros as something much sterner than the soft, modern Agathon does. With euphemism, the elegant Agathon suggests that the oldest of all poets could not have done justice to the youngest of all gods. Only the youngest poet, who is in his way eternally young, cosmetics, can do this. In the thought of the ancients, Ate, the daughter of Zeus, occupies a place which in the thought of the moderns is occupied by Eros. You know that phenomenon, the softening of manners, no longer guilt-ridden and fear-ridden, if I may use the favorite terms of the day. Agathon transforms Ate into Eros, something not beautiful, into something beautiful. There is a parallel to that in the Aristophanes speech. Aristophanes, the God who solves the riddle of the human soul, is Hephaestus, the limping God, who in addition was deceived by his wife, which is also something not beautiful. Now, in Agathon, the world of beauty rules unimpaired. Homer places the softness of Ate only in her feet, not in her whole being. You see, here too, Agathon improves. Homer, in the verse in the Iliad in the 19th book, continues when speaking of Ate, blood-tooth Andropus, she who damages or hurts human beings. This is completely suppressed by our refined poet. Eros does not walk on, there's another collection of Homer. Eros doesn't walk on such hard things as skulls. He walks only on such delicate, soft things as souls. And even on the souls of the, he walks on the softest of the softest, on the souls of the soft. That is his suggestion. Souls are the softest of beings. Souls as souls are soft, but characters, which is something which is made somehow out of the souls, they may be hard or hard, but the souls as souls are soft. Eros does not dwell in the souls of all gods. He does not dwell in the souls of the hard or harsh gods. Yet which god is harder and harsher than Ares, the god of war? And Eros dwells in the soul of Ares, as we know, Aphrodite. Well, perhaps he would say, Agathon would say that Eros makes all souls soft, but that remains to be seen. Now the next point, yes?
Then you spend in hostility proceed, and with all kind form. For he would never contrive to fold himself about us every way, nor steal in at first and pass out of every soul so secretly, if he were hard. Clear evidence of his fit proportion and clemency of form is found in his shapely ways. And he learned love, is in every quarter allowed to excel. Unshavenness and love are better at war with one another. Beauty of you in this God is included. Heaven's skies haunting among flowers. The love will not settle on body or soul or aught else that is flowerless, or whose flower has faded away. While he has only to write hot sweet blossoms and scents to settle there and stay. Enough has now been said, though much remains unsaid, of the beauty of our God.
Yeah, let's stop there. You see again the clear division, and in the next section he turns to the virtue of the God. Now let us see what he says in this last section. The beauty of usefulness, the beauty of tenderness, and the beauty of something which we can translate by of pliancy. The word means literally wet, fluid, and therefore also pliant, serpentine, languishing, melting, of shape. Shape, eidos in Greek. You see, eidos, the shape, which is also the word for the Platonic idea, occurs here only in the sense of visible shape. the eidos, the essence of Eros itself, does not become the theme of Agatha. Therefore he can pass, because he is so pliant, Eros can pass through every soul. For every soul, a soul is thought. This constitutes the symmetry of Eros. He makes himself symmetric to everything. His symmetry is his own pliancy. By being pliant to all, we could feel he is also pliable to the measureless, to the dissolute. Surely, Agatha does not make any distinction between noble and base Eros. Eros is as such noble or beautiful. Then Eros, the next one is Eros' beauty of color or complexion. Since he dwells among those of beautiful color, he must possess beautiful colors. Agathon, that is, let us see with it. Incidentally, Flower was the title of a tragedy by Agathon. Aristotle in his Poetics speaks of it. Now let us summarize what Agathon says regarding the beauty of Eros. Beauty means here obviously the beauty of the body of Eros. He is young, delicate, of a pliant shape, and of beautiful color. If we look at the source of information regarding Greek concepts of beauty and quite a few other things, then in Aristotle's rhetoric, we find that there are also two other elements of bodily beauty which Agathon omits: strength and size. Eros is not strong nor large. Furthermore, even if we would add to Agathon's four qualities these two qualities of strength and size, these qualities would not be sufficient for making a human being beautiful. As you can easily figure out, a strong man of proper size, who is young, delicate, of a pliant shape and beautiful color, is not yet for this reason beautiful as a human being. The proportions are missing. We know to our surprise that there is not a word said about a human shape of Eros in a passage dealing with Eros' bodily beauty. One could say that Eros, as described by Agathon, has the beauty of a serpent or a butterfly, at least as much as, especially a serpent, as the beauty of a human shape. Of course, as he said at the end of the speech, the enumeration of the beautiful qualities of Eros is not complete, and perhaps he would have mentioned there also the human beauty of Eros. But it is strange that in what he did say, nothing suggested a specifically human shape. Now, you see the transition from Eros' beauty to Eros' goodness or virtue. This means one thing. Eros' goodness is not his beauty. Virtue is not beautiful, not colorful, not noble. For beauty means the beauty of the body. There is a peculiar parallelism of the praise of Eros' beauty and the praise of his goodness. We have four beautiful qualities of beauty and four virtues: youth, delicacy, pliancy, and beautiful color. And in goodness we have justice, moderation, courage or manliness, and wisdom. The question would be, is there any meaning in that parallelism between youth and justice and so? Or are they perhaps opposites? I would suggest that those of you who can afford to invest half an hour in his work, that they would look at a parallel in another Platonic dialogue, and that is in the first book of Plato's Laws, 631b following, where you find a similar parallelism of the virtues of the body and the virtues of the soul. But there is a strict correspondence of the two. Yeah, I think we should now, it's too late now, we will finish next time, I hope, the speech of Agathon and begin with the rest speech. If there is a point which is particularly pressing, I shall be glad to take it up. All right, then next time.